Welcome to Disruption Dialogues Podcast Season 2. Listen to the influential leaders and trailblazers from around the world as they share invaluable insights to navigating the fifth industrial revolution.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Disruption Dialogues Season 2. I'm your host, Aashish Mehra. I'm the Chief Research Officer at MarketsandMarkets. Our topic for today is Seeds of Change, Innovations for Smallholder Farmers. And for this interesting topic, I'm in conversation with Venkata Kishore, Vice President, Global Head of Vegetable Seeds, Smallholders, and Sustainability at Bayer. Inspired by the challenges faced by smallholder farmers, Kishore has dedicated his career to agriculture, aiming to better the lives of rural communities. He's also a pivotal member of the Vegetable Strategic Marketing Leadership Team at Bayer. Kishore, pleasure to have you here, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Aashish. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So why don't we kick off, Kishore? And perhaps the first thing I'd like to ask is, what do you mean by an ecosystem approach to sustainability? And what does that entail as far as Bayer Crop Science is concerned, especially in the context of supporting small-scale farms?
Yeah. So for me, an ecosystem means, looking at things holistically, right? So not looking at just areas where you are an expert at. As an example, take at Bayer's commitment. One of our sustainability commitments is to improve lives of 100 million smallholder farmers. Now, when we talk about improving lives of 100 million smallholder farmers, it cannot be just about providing them better inputs like seeds or chemistry, right, to protect their crops. We really need to take a very human-centric kind of an approach. If you take a smallholder farmer and then think about what are all the challenges that they have to really improve their lives, then you cannot just take an approach of that, if we just give them better seeds and better crop protection, which is exactly what Bayer is an expert at today, will not simply help them to improve their lives, right? So what we really need to look at is what are the challenges that they have throughout the value chain. Some farmers might need help with credit. Some farmers might need help with growing the crops better, having more knowledge on how to grow their crops better, how to improve their productivity. Some farmers might have challenges with access to good inputs like good seeds, good chemistry. Some farmers might actually have needing help with market linkage, to sell the produce so that they can actually make decent income. Now, Bayer cannot be an expert in all of them, but we are committed to improving lives of 100 million smallholder farmers. And we do that by working in partnerships, by bringing an ecosystem together so that when we put the farmer at the center of this ecosystem, then we are doing everything together with others to help really improve their life. So that's kind of what we call as an ecosystem kind of an approach, rather than a very targeted approach where you just work in the areas of where you are an expert at and what you bring to life. So that's kind of what we mean by an ecosystem approach.
I think that's really fantastic, and you articulated it well. So I just want to tease that up a little bit, one at a time, Kishore. Let's first talk a little bit more about the challenges which smallholder farmers face, especially when adopting sustainable practices. And could you also tell us a bit more about what do they gain if they were to embrace some of these sustainable practices?
Yeah, great question. I always say this to a lot of people when I'm talking in the area of sustainability. You really can't preach sustainability on empty stomachs, right? The first and the foremost thing that is important, from a smallholder perspective, is that they really need to make a decent income so that they have a good standard of life, right? So, and that means better productivity. taking care of their land well. So whatever you talk about from a sustainability practices perspective, it really needs to fit into this basic need of the farmer being able to make a good amount of income. Now, I just give you an example of how at Bayer we've been addressing this. So at Bayer, when we think about, sustainability, regenerative ag, we really think about soil health as one of the more important components of this overall ecosystem. And the smallholder farmer is actually worried about the health of the soil too, because in the long run, they want to make sure that their kids are inheriting that piece of land, which is an asset for them, and that land continues to be productive for a long period of time. But sometimes they forget that in the short term because they need to produce more. And that means maybe they use, not they're not they use probably fertilizers or chemistries or whatever, in maybe not the recommended sense that would help to keep the health of the soil. So one of the things that we have tried to bring in when we talk about these concepts with the smallholder farmers is this the balance, following the recommended practices and showing how it benefits them in order to improve income. As an example, we don't advocate for growing the same crop over and over and again on the soil, right? So let's say, for example, you do your tomatoes, then maybe you can rotate it with fresh beans, right? So growing beans will help nitrogen fixation in the soil, and that in turn will help you, improve the health of the soil, right? So the next crop that you take, and then you don't have to apply as much fertilizers. So those are simple examples. I think examples like where we have advocated for intercropping. There is a great example in Maharashtra in India, where our teams actually went and talked to the small farmers who have, a few, half an acre of an orchard. Yeah, they've just planted an orchard. The grapes are still yet to yield. They can still intercrop them with our Moralida beans. Moralida is a variety in beans, and they can grow beans. And now, how does that help? Now they generate, income by selling beans until the grapes start yielding, right? The beans also help to improve the health of the soil. So it's a win-win kind of situation. Examples like that also in Latin America, where farmers, have coffee plantations. And, we've been advocating them that, when the coffee plants are still small, right, they should be able to grow some of these vegetables, which help them in securing some income pretty quickly, but also help the health of the soil. So I think that's how, and those are a few examples where, we are actively helping smallholder farmers with these sustainable practices, but keeping in mind that they ultimately also really need to help with generating more income for them at the end of the day.
That's excellent. And this really brings me to a very interesting question, which a lot of the other companies can also benefit from. And the question really is, how does a commercially oriented company like Bayer balance economic viability and profitability together with ecological and social impact for small growers? How does that work?
Well, I think, we have very recently, I think probably last year sometime, I think our president of the company for the crop science division, Rodrigo Santos, has clearly articulated that, we are not just no longer going to be only about sustainable agriculture, but it's more around regenerative agriculture. So we're making that shift. And the reason why we're making that huge shift is simply because the rate at which the climate change is having an impact on agriculture, we cannot simply sustain ourselves the progress that we're making with purely looking at from a sustainability perspective. It's no longer about just producing more with less, we also have to add to that restoring nature and restoring more, right? So it's producing more with less plus restoring nature. That's exactly what we're trying to do in case of Bayer Crop Science overall, right? So the idea that that with innovations that will help us not only produce more with less resources, but also innovations that will help restore. As I said, a few examples before about soil health, right? How do you help restore? There are examples like, and there are crop system examples that we can talk eventually as we go through that as well, where you really transform the ways in which crops are grown, right? So that you don't have an impact on the production capacity, but that also helps us to use less land, less resources, and use that less land now to restore nature. No? So I think those are some of the things that where when we think about, and there are opportunities here in the space. So I think it's also that when you if you look at some of the comments that we have shared earlier when we were talking about transitioning from sustainable agriculture to regenerative agriculture, the overall market size, that you play with when you are in a regenerative agriculture space doubles compared to what it is when you are purely playing from only a sustainability perspective, right? So I think commercial and economic viability actually go hand in hand with sustainability or with regenerative agriculture, because you won't be able to sustain and be sustainable as a business unless there is economic viability as well, right? So
Super. And in that context, could you tell us a bit more about, some specific outcomes from initiatives that you might be driving, and how you're overcoming some of these challenges, etc.?
yeah, so one of the initiatives that I'm very proud about is this alliance that we talked about, and as you know that I'm very passionate about partnerships, right? And as I articulated earlier, in order for us to holistically improve life of smallholder farmers, you have to work in an ecosystem approach, and in an ecosystem approach, partnerships is the key. And our approach has been, I think, to bring partners together, and we've created this ecosystem called as Better Life Farming. Okay, where we have these centers on the ground, and we have close to, I would say, roughly around 3,000 Better Life Farming centers today around the world. A majority of them are in Asia, but then we're also having quite a few of them now in Africa, and then also in Latin America. India being our key, I think close to around, I think maybe around 2,000 centers, maybe 1,500 to 2,000 centers, roughly around somewhere there, just in India. These centers are actually, run by agri-entrepreneurs. So Bayer, in collaboration with Netafim and IFC, has pulled together this concept of Better Life Farming Centers, where we go into a community, we identify an agri-entrepreneur, and what we make sure is that we provide them, the guidance, some capital to get started, so that they can actually physically put a store where farmers can come and get access to quality inputs like seeds and fertilizer and chemistry. But also, this is also a place where we have partnered with, an example in India, with Axis Bank, to come and provide access to credit to smallholder farmers. We've also partnered with a lot of market linkage kind of agencies so that the farmers can bring their produce to these centers, and they can sell their produce here, and that way eliminating kind of the middlemen, right, in this space as well. So there is this kind of an ecosystem which I'm really very proud about what we have done. We actually did an impact assessment for this particular studies in India. How are better life farming centers helping, right? And overall, it was noted that the farmers that are part of this better life farming center experience on the ecosystem reported about 78% of them reported increase in crop productivity. And then about 72% of them also helped in reported that they actually experienced an increased income. Okay, prior to them being, in the Better Life Farming Center ecosystem, and overall, about 71% of them actually said that their quality of life has improved and they have, a better standard of life. So for me, those are some great examples of how, when you work together in a partnership kind of an approach, you can help improve really lives of smallholder farmers.
Super. And is there, when you talk about this Better Life farming initiative, is this also targeted at improving the overall well-being of these small landholders?
Great, right?
And could you talk us through a bit of that as well, please?
That's a great one, actually.
From,
In fact,
yeah.
yeah, this is really nice because if you compare, if you look at Bayer's overall vision, no, our mission is to health for all and hunger for none. And Bayer is actually uniquely positioned as a company from a both health perspective and a hunger perspective, right? So if you look at, we're a life sciences company, we have a consumer health division that talks about well-being, self-care. And then we have crop science division, which is talking about reducing hunger, zero hunger. We have our commitments towards zero hunger initiatives as well, right? And Better Life Farming is a place where we actually pulled both of these things together. So our consumer health division originally had one of their sustainability commitments, which was called as the nutrient gap initiative. Where, as part of that initiative, we committed to improving the nutrition of 50 million people in low and middle income countries. Okay, and in 2023, so last year, right? So both the divisions came together, and we kind of joined hands, and then we said a lot of these people that consumer health was trying to work with is to improve their nutrition in the low and middle income countries are really smallholder farmers. Okay. So, and we have, these Better Life Farming Centers as a great place where we can use these centers where farmers come to really help, advocate for information around nutrition and also help them provide some of these supplements, and also access to nutrient dense vegetable seeds, right? So basically, if you think about from a food perspective, vegetables are one of the more nutrient dense food crops, and by us providing vegetable seeds with which are appealing, which are tasty, which have higher nutrition to these smallholder farmers, we're also helping them to improve their nutrition, right? So this is a place where both of those two things have come together. And we have also worked with partners like Vitamin Angels, where Vitamin Angels works with our Better Life Farming Centers in some parts of the country, and they reach out to these smallholder farmers and provide them access to prenatals and a bunch of other supplements and things like this, where overall has an impact on improving the well-being of the farmer themselves. So for me, I think the Nutrient Gap Initiative is a great place where you can actually see the transformative power of one Bayer, where we address both the health and the hunger aspect, and then talk about really the overall well-being of the farmer.
That's phenomenal, especially the coming together of two divisions, as you said, Kishore. Kishore, I wanted to switch tracks a little bit, and in this world of connectivity and digital, I wanted to seek your perspective on the role data and digital technologies may have played in sustainable and regenerative agriculture. and how maybe data analytics could be leveraged or is being leveraged to enhance sustainability for small growers?
Yeah. So for me, I think it's pretty important. When we talk about digital, that that we look at, how are you really going to overall improve sustainability, or how are you going to make sure that people are following the regenerative agriculture practices, right, that have been recommended. And that means that there needs to be some way to measure, to first of all track, then measure, and then see whether if you're making an improvement or not. And also to really to showcase to the farmer that these are the benefits. Because unless they see the benefits, it's not going to be a long-term sustainable thing, right? So digital becomes very important in this space, because digital is the way in which you would be able to track, measure, and then showcase, right? So in that sense, I think digital is key, and it's a very key component. When I don't see that we could drive sustainability or regenerative ag in that sense at a scale that the world needs without digital interventions, right? So for me, digital is really a part and parcel of this entire regenerative agriculture narrative. Um, a few examples, I think, of course, that I can take a look at, especially in the smallholder farming space, is on how we're helping improve sustainability through digital interventions. Is I would say a great example was for me one of the projects that we did in India, where hot pepper growers, right? They have a lot of problems with the virus. So what we tried to do was we put sensors in the fields, um, and we were able to actually capture information on the whitefly infestation, right? So whiteflies are always the source for bringing in viruses into plants. So we were able to capture that, and we were able to actually even predict when the infestation would reach its peak. And before it would reach its peak, we would then provide a prescription to the farmer, and then we would actually provide a service where drones would be used to spray those spots in the field with chemistry very precisely, so that the infestation is completely reduced, and then you actually don't see that virus infestation, right? Now this is still a pilot, and we are working, and this has not been scaled yet. But for me, these are kind of test and learn kind of experiments that we are doing at this point of time, especially in the smallholder space, right? Because I think it's I would not say it's easy, but rather relatively a little bit more easier, to do this when you're talking about the US or Europe, where you have large scales of farm and the farmers can afford to pay for some of these digital technologies. You have to be very creative in case of the smallholder farmer space, right? Because not everybody
Absolutely.
can afford for these kinds of stuff, and we'll have to look into Uberization of some of these services, and we'll
Right.
have to deal more kind of in a service space, and you think about digital from that angle. So several of these experiments are right now, I would say, in a test and learn phase, but we are very encouraged by some of the results that we have seen, and hopefully, we launch some of these services as we move forward to help the smallholder farmers improve their productivity. Yeah.
Super. And perhaps I'd like to conclude by learning a bit more about looking into the future, right? What are some of the innovations or new technologies which you are particularly excited about in the context of overall well-being for small growers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think when I think about innovation for the future, I mean, historically, it has always been, a product related innovation that we've been talking about, right? So like, for example, we would say, oh yeah, here is a new tomato hybrid and it has an improved shelf life. It reduces food waste. It gets you, or its color is much better. It has less disease resistance, or it's more disease resistance. So there is value that we articulate to farmers, and then they secure that value by selling the produce from the traders, right? So that is being more product specific. I think really the holy grail for the future is really about a crop system kind of an approach. To talk about publicly, one of the examples that I can share is the direct seeded rice. Okay, that would be a great example. Of course, there are some examples within vegetables that we are working on that we haven't shared publicly yet, but I think the direct seeded rice is a great one that we have been telling our story to the world. If you think about this, right, in case of rice cultivation, and you think about the use of water, right? You think about carbon emissions or methane emissions in this case. The traditional way of growing rice has a lot of sustainability issues and challenges. And if you want to really make a step change in this space, you have to start thinking about how can you mechanize a lot of these things, use less water, bring less carbon emissions or less methane emissions. And the direct seeded rice is actually a systems approach where we are bringing in all of these innovations, and it's not just one particular aspect of a better rice hybrid variety that we're talking about. We're talking about really improving the entire ecosystem, the entire crop system for rice from that angle. So for me, I think it's innovations like those that will really drive the future of agriculture. And I think that's primarily from a smallholder farmer perspective, what I think about, where crop systems that enable farmers to have less and less labor, more mechanization, better tasting food, right? Better nutritious food, and produce that'll help them get a better price from the traders in the markets. If you're able to pull all of these things together, I think we have a pretty bright future for agriculture there.
Thank you so much, Kishore, on that very optimistic note. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today. And thank you everyone for listening in. I was in conversation with Kishore, Vice President and Global Head of Vegetable Seeds for Small Growers and Sustainability at Bayer. Thanks once again, Kishore. And folks, do stay tuned in for more interesting episodes on Disruption Dialogues. Thank you.
Thank you, Aashish.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to know how you can navigate and thrive in this disruptive era, subscribe to Disruption Dialogues on your go-to podcast channels and stay tuned for more interesting episodes.